Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the DEF2021 event on Special Operations Customer Discovery. Thank you for joining us here on a Saturday. No doubt y'all wanted to be here, and I want to do some great things with Special Operations Command. I'm honored to host this panel. This topic's near and dear to my heart, and that's why I wanted to take some time and share some information and some personal experiences with you. My current role, I'm a national security advisor in the U.S. government. Before I had to get a real job, I was fortunate to spend most of my military career in Special Operations Command. Throughout my career in Socom, I've been fortunate to be both the recipient of and part of developing some great technologies. In both cases, I can tell you that Socom gets cutting-edge technology in the hands of the warfighter faster than anybody else in the Department of Defense. I know from numerous deployments to the Middle East, Europe, Africa, that we're always testing new gear, next-gen comms, sensors, autonomous systems, energy sources, and advanced materials. During my time in leadership, we were constantly seeking new hardware and software for enterprise solutions to increase effectiveness at speed. For me, the best part was seeing the dual use and commercial off-the-shelf technology. We used things that were readily available within the commercial space to solve some really unconventional problems, and Socom does this better than anybody else. The reps at Socom down at the command, they're constantly visiting the units. They're constantly working with the end users, trying to determine capability gaps and figure out, how to solve big problems. Socom Science and Technology, the program executive offices, and Softworks are highly engaged and constantly scouting for new tech to push to operators in the field. A lot of you joining us today might be trying to figure out where in this giant Department of Defense you should plug in and try to bring your tech solutions to bear. And I would urge all of you to consider Socom. Personally, I want to make sure that the Socom operators always have the best technology possible. And that's why I felt it was important to have this event on customer discovery. Steve Blank famously said, the key to a successful minimum viable product is getting out of the building and engaging with your customers. But how do you do that when you want to work with Socom? The shadowy and often elusive organization seems out of touch and just unaccessible to many, but this couldn't be further from the truth. Socom is one of the most innovative creators of and utilizers of defense technologies over the last 30 years. And someone in this audience may develop the next life-changing, life-saving, or leap-ahead technology for our nation's special operators. And that's why we're here today. The goal of today's event is to solve the customer discovery dilemma, giving you a better understanding of the organization, where it's going, what it needs, and how you can work with them. Today, we have an amazing panel of speakers from the Special Operations Command. First, we have Mr. Robert Jones. He's a retired U.S. Army Special Forces Colonel, a former Deputy District Attorney, and the Senior Strategist at United States Special Operations Command. He currently serves as a member of the Socom J5 Donovan Strategic Initiatives Group. Mr. Jones is responsible for leading innovative thinking on strategic environment and how it impacts factor into national security. Next, we have Ms. Lisa Sanders. She's the director of Socom Science and Technologies at U.S. Socom headquarters down in Tampa. She's responsible for all research and development activities. She has over 30 years of experience in the federal civil service. She's an electronics engineer, and she's worked on platforms from the E2C Hawkeye to the CV-22 Osprey. She assumed the role of Director of Science and Technologies in 2011. Finally, we have Ms. Leslie Babich. She's the Director of Softworks, our Socom Innovation Hub. Leslie provides operational and personnel oversight while developing and implementing business plans that optimize results for U.S. Special Operations Command. Leslie brings 20 years of experience from the Special Operations community, where she served as an MC-130 pilot in Air Force Special Operations Command, has held various leadership positions, and deployed multiple times around the world. She assumed her role as Director of Softworks in 2020. I've asked each one of our distinguished guests to provide a short presentation about their role in Special Operations technology and innovation, where they're headed in the next 3 to 5 years, and what they need from you. Hopefully, this will give you all the ideas and get you thinking about how to solve some of the problems that the command has. I'd now like to turn it over to Robert to discuss the current threat landscape and what he's seeing from the J5. Robert, over to you.
Okay, great. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here. And I will give the audience the same warning I gave the organizers that I'm not a technology guy, right? So I'm here to offer some context on how we think about the strategic environment and where we've been and where we're going forward. And right up front, I'll say, if you only remember three things. Number one, if you're incredibly tactically proficient, but your strategic goals elude you, you've probably got the problem wrong. So we really need to take a hard look at the problem at this point of inflection. Two, in an era where power is shifting so rapidly from governments to populations, populations are the opportunity space. And this is where SOF excels. And this is where we really need to look to going forward, is how we get the problem right, operate in this population opportunity space. And lastly, if you have a threat focus, you're always on the back foot, you're always reactive, you're chasing the bad guy, you're chasing him in his pursuit of his interests, and you never catch up. And so that is why an interest focus is so much more important. Obviously, there are challengers to our interests, and we need to deal with those challengers, but we need to stay focused on where we're going. Let us be known for what we're for rather than for what we fear. Okay, so I am a member of the Donovan Group. I'm co-director, and the group is in a evolution right now. We had gone into an era where we're fairly tech heavy, actually, working closely with Softworks, and we've pulled back from that, and now we are partnered with JSOW, and what we're trying to do is to take the incredible intellectual bandwidth from JSOW with the operational requirements of the J5 to be focused on the commander's priorities and ensure we are in touch with what the components and the SOCs are challenged with and dealing with, and provide them with some degree of insight as we work to take what Dr. Wilson at JSOW calls know and do. So they bring the know, we bring the do. We're trying to integrate that together and get to better understanding and dealing with the problems before us. Now, as I go into this realm, this is kind of how I see the world of us who are in the business or trying to solve these problems. I'm going to build this out a little bit. Planners work above this line. We're all kind of at this X right here in the middle, and the right answer comes from above, where strategy is the height of command, whereas the good answer is down below you someplace in the depth of understanding. And the right answer is easy. If someone asks you what's the right answer, it's the commander said, doctrine says, the strategy says, the plan says. That's always the right answer. And it's a world where things are codified, constrained. And I think of this as the land of Ed. Everything is funneled down onto that planner, that commander who's trying to figure out how to go out and be successful. And in this world, they convert assumptions into facts and theory into knowledge, and it's all about getting out there and solving that problem. Now, the challenge is, in an era of tremendous change as is occurring currently, doctrine becomes obsolete. Things we believe to be true historically are being revealed as not as true as we thought they were, which brings us down into this pursuit of the good answer. And as we're going down here, it's a spiral process. You're constantly drilling into various fields of study, trying to either validate the right answer or discover new insights that help you make the right answer better. So this is what I think of as the land of un, and this is this struggle between the right answer in the land of ed and the good answer in the land of un. But down here, things are unknown, they're unconstrained, unstructured, unconventional. They're often very unsettling because they challenge the status quo. They challenge what senior leaders have believed as right throughout their careers. And so this is very difficult when you find something and you're trying to shift the organization, to create a paradigm shift, to get to better strategic effects. And down in this world, you got to put all the facts on the table, because you're converting those facts back into assumption. Is something actually a fact, or is it just a calcified assumption we've carried around in our rucksack throughout our careers? And now we're realizing that wasn't as true as we thought it was, and it's caused our efforts to not be as successful as they could have been. And we're taking anything we think we know, and we're challenging that too. We're taking that knowledge and breaking it back down into theory. It's a deconstruction process to find better truths. So above the line is all about redefining the X. Down below here, it's about solving for why. Why is this happening? And how do we do better? Now, it's all about getting from policy to action. And as I look at the policy challenges and guidance coming down to us, for me, the number one challenge is how do we sustain and maintain leadership of a rules-based order? And in fact, the reason China has been designated as the primary threat for us to focus on is because they are seen as the actor with the capability and the intent to replace us in that role. So this makes a great focus. This is something that we are campaigning for to facilitate America's leadership role going into the future. Now, strategy and plans have framed this as competition under the previous administration. The current administration is shifting towards what they like to call integrated deterrence. But whether you call it competition or integrated deterrence, we're always competing. We're always deterring. I think both of these were really efforts to highlight the importance that, hey, the competition's getting real, and we can't just assume that we're going to show up and just win because we're America. And on integrated deterrence, there are new challenges in this environment. War is still deterred very well, but these problematic acts of competition left to bang, those type of warfare deterrent efforts don't work well there. And then there are new things coming in cyberspace, et cetera, that we need to think about. So how do we get to a more comprehensive scheme of deterrence and integrate those activities more effectively? The threats are named, China's number one, and then get out there and operate. Whoops. Keep on the right buttons here. Here we go. So here's a keen insight I'd like to share. And this idea that, we love to focus on the threat, the bad guy, that actor that is causing us angst in any particular moment in space. But as we look at what's really happening in this incredibly information empowered environment that we're in, it's revealing that governance, whether it's a country and their domestic policy and internal stability, or a country and their foreign policy and their external challenges, governance is both the cause and the cure of the troubles before us. And this is a hard pill because it's more comfortable to blame your challenges on somebody else and to not take any responsibility for what's going on. So as we look into this, as in our work, we've really looked at the trying to get down to the fundamentals and the human nature of this, and recognize that populations form around identities, and these population groups are connected and empowered in ways that is unprecedented and incredibly powerful dynamic that's out there around the globe. And as we look at what the real issue is, it's easy to just say, this is overwhelming. There's so many factors going on. How do we possibly get out there and fix this stuff? Well, we don't have to fix it, but we do need to understand it. And we need to understand, ultimately, it's about how do people feel about the governance affecting their life, and who do they blame? Because that's what's going to shape whether a population is resilient, or whether you have positive influence, or whether you're being provocative and creating resistance effects or revolutionary effects in a population. And ultimately, it comes down to a handful of very simple perceptions. Do people recognize the right of some government to affect their life? Do they feel that the government affecting their life is appropriate in the context of their culture? Do they perceive themselves to be treated with justice under the rule of law? Do they perceive themselves to be treated with dignity and respect equal to similarly situated populations? And do they feel empowered? Do they feel empowered to address these types of grievances in ways that are certain and effective and legal? Because it's when a population acts out illegally that one gets into revolution. Violence is a distraction. It doesn't define a problem. But if a population is acting out illegally in the laws of the government they're challenging, you are in a revolutionary situation. Okay, so the best way to kind of frame this out, though, is to kind of think of it as like a circle of trust. And in any situation, whether it's here domestically or as we go abroad, simple construct, you're going to have some sort of system of governance. There's going to be populations that are resilient, that are inside the circle, that perceive these perceptions to be largely favorable. And there's going to be populations that are outside, that for whatever set of drivers is perceiving these perceptions not being met. And they are exploitable populations. And internal insurgent groups will emerge, and they will exploit this grievance in these populations for their advantage. External actors will show up and internal actors will show up. So we show up, we conduct what we call in soft foreign internal defense, and we try to help bring stability to this location. Now, the old playbook, colonialism, and for the past 10,000 years of mankind, the answer was you show up, you keep the government that you think is good for you in power, and you help them deal with the threats to that government. And basically that really was suppressing the symptoms. The problem is now these symptoms are so much harder to suppress. And the very act of trying to suppress the symptoms is actually making these problems worse, and is leading to great provocation that could be very dangerous to our country. So we have to rethink the problem and rethink how we get after this. Because external actors show up as well, whether it's a state actor conducting unconventional warfare to exploit this grievance to advance their agendas, or, and this could be Russia, it could be China, Iran is very good at this. We do this. Everybody does this. State actors have done this forever. They'll show up and they'll leverage the insurgent energy of a population governed by somebody else to advance their own interests. What's new in the last 30 years is these non-state actors, Al-Qaeda and ISIS, conduct unconventional warfare as well. There's no such thing as global insurgency. These are not franchises. This is just block and tackle, fundamental, unconventional warfare, leveraging insurgency to advance your interests. So how do we shift to out-competing these actors for influence with these populations, out-competing them for influence with insurgent groups, disrupting their UW campaigns? Well, step one is we have to reframe the problem. As we think about this, I'll throw up a couple quick bins. One, you put governance in the middle. Now, it's the role of governance everywhere to provide governance that is perceived as appropriate and create a stable society. This is our blue space. But governments also will create laws that are bad, that lead to criminal enterprises. Prohibition, classic example, our current drug laws, they create tremendous, illicit, violent competition to exploit a demand for an illegal product. And this can be very destabilizing. It erodes your blue space. Equally, if governance is perceived as poor, these perceptions we talked about earlier, it creates revolutionary energy in a population, and that erodes your blue space. And you're getting into a very unstable situation as these laws, are perceived as poor, or they create these types of markets. They all look the same and they interact with each other. So the top of the bin, you're seeing where criminals will destabilize governments and revolutionary groups will engage in illegal activities. So we'll label things by how they look or bundle them to fit within our authorities, and we end up attacking the symptoms. So to understand a problem, you got to ask, what's the primary purpose for action? If it's illegal for political purpose, primary action, then you need to deal with the governance aspects. If it's illegal for profit, that's a criminal activity, and you deal with those laws that are creating that market, and you figure out how do you mitigate these things. Ultimately, you're trying to create and maximize your blue space. And what can we do as security forces? All we can do is help understand the dynamic that's going on. We can create time and space for civil authorities to understand where the changes need to be made. And we can mitigate and disrupt the high end of violence. But there is no military solution or law enforcement solution to these types of problems. And so governments need to own this. They need to own these dynamics. But it's really easy to blame crime on the criminals and revolution on the revolutionaries, and then just kind of clean your hands of the problem and send the military out to beat it down for you. That is an obsolete playbook. Now, we as a nation, we go out into the world where we perceive ourselves to have interests, and we're working with some host nation government. And that host nation government, remember, with the population in the center, how that population perceives the governance of their own government is going to determine whether that population is stable or whether there's this exploitable revolutionary energy in that population. When we show up to work to secure our interests, we too impact that population. And you don't have to physically occupy a space to create a resistance effect in a population. If your policies are perceived as inappropriate, you can create that same energy. And this is what Al-Qaeda and ISIS exploit. They'll show up to the same space where this revolutionary energy between a rapidly evolving population and a government that's being slow to turn, or where our foreign policies aren't in step, or where we're still implementing the old playbook too aggressively. Al-Qaeda or ISIS shows up and they say, hey, look, we'll help you deal with your problems if you help us deal with our problem. And then there we go. So how do we think about this? In Afghanistan, we never really broke this problem apart. We bundled it together. So we got to break it apart. You got to say, okay, there's revolutionary issues that we have to deal with. That's a form of illegal democracy. There's resistance issues that are based upon what we're doing here. That's a form of irregular warfare. It looks the same on the ground. There's no tactical solution. For the soldier, it all looks the same. We just got to break it apart at the policy level, the strategic level, and then solve across the dynamics of the equation. How do we help the host nation be better in step with their population? How do we ensure our activities are appropriate and not creating resistance? How do we disrupt and mitigate these actors that are coming in to exploit this? And this also gives us windows of opportunity with state actors like an Iran or China that might show up in this space, because they too will provoke populations in ways to create resistance energy. And these are opportunities for deterrence, where we can use our special operators in ways to get inside the mind of the Chinese and make them nervous about how we might be able to disrupt activities that they don't want disrupted. And this has got to be a global campaign because it's a global competition. So these are the insights that I wanted to share. Gotta make sure I don't overclick here. And I would just leave with this final thought from Thucydides, that of all the manifestations of power, restraint impresses men most. And sometimes we overengage, and a bit of restraint and understanding the problem better, we can get to better strategic effects. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. That was very insightful. I think that aligns with a lot of the national defense strategy that we're seeing right now, working with partners and allies. And I would just extend to everybody on the audience. One of the biggest things that we need to think about is not only how do we create solutions to the problems that we're having here in the U.S. and U.S. military, but also our partners' exportability. We want interoperability, and we want to be able to work with. We want our partners. America never fights alone, right? We always want our partners to have the best with us, and we want to be aligned with their initiatives. And I think that's a great point, that we really have to think about our partners and our host nations in the beginning of the planning process here and strategically. So thank you, Robert. That was amazing. Now I'd like to pass it over to Ms. Lisa Sanders, Director of Science and Technology.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Hope everybody is doing well this morning. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. Really appreciate the backdrop and strategic environment that Robert provided to us. But it's going to be a radical shift in conversation here. So where Robert was really talking about the why, which was great because it gave us a frame, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how do we provide capability to those operators. Mike referred to this quite a bit in his opening remarks. So just so that everybody on this call is oriented, I know not everybody knows the same background on special operations and what we do. Special Operations Command, the common perception is what you see on TV, what you see in movies like Oh Dark 30. There's TV shows, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about big guys that have guns and knock down doors and take action. They do things. Well, the reality is that Special Operations has a variety of missions that we perform for the nation, aligned with national military strategy. And Robert talked a little bit about how that's shifting. And really, we do see a strong emphasis, and this is part of our DNA and part of our culture, about building influence, working by, with, and through partners to achieve an objective that is commonly held. And that is not kicking down a door and shooting somebody. But it does cover the range of military operations. So just slightly more than 30 years ago, Congress actually implemented Special Operations Command and its authorities into law. This is very unique. It's not the way anything else was formed, but we were formed through law, through legislation, as both a component command responsible for special operations and assigned specific missions like executing the global war on terror, counter weapons of mass destruction, influence operations. We've got several missions that are in our job jar from an operational perspective. But the unique thing when they formed it, and it has now, there's a couple of other entities that have this now, but we were the first one, and for 30 years, we were the only component command that also had service-like responsibilities. So we actually have a budget, a separate budget to procure equip, develop, and sustain capability for our operators that are special operations unique. There are things that we need that the rest of DoD does not implement, at least on the same timeline we do. So that gives us that ability that Mike was referring to, the ability to iterate, innovate quickly, put capability out in the hands of the warfighter. It was legislated and provided to us as an authority. So I implement one of those authorities, the science and technology component of that process. I don't have to sustain things through life. I don't have to dispose of them. I develop stuff. So what do we do? What's that range? I mean, am I a DARPA? Am I, like Air Force Research Lab? The answer is not exactly. The funding that we have is authorized to do applied research through initial prototype. So I don't do basic research. I don't do things that are in test tubes. I don't do a lot of things that are in labs. We typically talk about things where the concept has been developed, and it is how do you take that concept and move that into a capability. It is across the range of military operations. We do everything from submarines to satellites, from radios to body armor. We do all of the soft medical capability. So one of our projects we did in the past was freeze-dried plasma. So like blood, tourniquets, medical devices, things like that. Software, cyber activities, platform upgrades, etc. We have about $170 million a year in the science and technology budget, which is single-digit percentages of what any of the other federal agencies have. So we leverage a lot of activities, both from the commercial sector and in partner across DoD. We typically, our project sweet spot are things that are about $3 to $5 million per capability per year, and can be fielded within 3 to 5 years. So we'd be looking for a prototype in anywhere between 18 months and 3 years. That's kind of the sweet spot where we are. We typically do between 10 and 20 new starts a year, because I said 3 to 5 year projects. So we've got a number of things that are carrying on each year. I am not going to spend a lot of time on what our specific focus areas are. You can Google that. We've got a very open doing business with Socom. Here's what SOF's technology capability focus areas are. If anybody has problems finding that, first of all, I'd like to know that you're having problems finding it, because we need to make it more accessible. But I don't want to take our time on something you can find other places, so you don't have to frantically write these down. If you can't find it, hit me on LinkedIn. I will get you the links to it. What I want to talk about is how can you innovate with us? Because I mentioned that the command has the full range. We do normal acquisition. We don't have any unique authorities that anybody else doesn't have. But the Science and Technology Directorate, we're chartered with what are the things that I don't have a requirement for, that's not a program of record, that that I can't put in a normal contract for. So we do things like open innovations. We do hackathons. We sponsor partnerships with academia. We have an open vehicle with our local university, University of South Florida, to reach out to the academic community and connect to those grant-giving institutions to stimulate that environment. We heavily leverage small businesses, both through Small Business Innovative Research, which is a federal program, as well as our partnership with Softworks that Leslie will talk about here in a minute. We do, I want to hit on a couple of them a little deeper. One is our open innovation foundries. As we, about 4 years ago, saw the shift to a strategic competition, integrated, what has now become integrated deterrence and peer adversaries, we realized that a bottom-up driven technology insertion map was going to miss a lot of opportunities. But we didn't want to just go cherry picking science. Oh, let's go see what AI can do for us, or let's go see what nano or biomimetics can do for us. We really wanted to say, what are the problems we're trying to solve, and where can technology enable them? And so we put in place a design thinking based model where we bring together special operations relevant problems with warfighters and non-traditional thinkers. So these are all held at an unclassified level, all held with large proponents that don't have any experience working with the federal government or Department of Defense. And we strategize, we brainstorm, we come up with some concepts. I mean, I literally have had stick a laser on a shark kind of conversations at these things. I've had a 10-year-old genius, prodigy that's an AI expert come and participate in these things. Really diverse ways that we think. And then we don't just stop at the concept though. That's I've heard that, and I don't know if Leslie will use this term. It gets used a lot when we talk with Softworks. That can be innovation theater. Oh gee, look at the cool people we're talking to. They wear different clothes and they, have different hair, and they wear tattoos and all that. No, we really then we want to get different ideas. We want to talk to different people, because asking the same people the same question and expecting a different answer is the definition of insanity. But we want to take those ideas and then break them down into what would we do next. So usually coming out of any innovation foundry, we'll take between 6 and 10 concepts and deconstruct them into where is the actual technological gap. Who else is working in that gap? Because if it's a gap that a lot of people are working on, let's give you an example. Lots of people are working on making power more available. So I am not going to invest in, I'm not going to create the best battery that exists. There's a lot of people doing that. I'm not going to leverage that. I may watch that, because when I can, I often throw out that when I can get Mr. Fusion, if y'all remember the Back to the Future reference, in a Red Bull can, then I guarantee you I can find lots of ways to use it, but I'm not going to pay for developing that. There's lots of people doing it. We look into what is special operations unique. Where can technology enable that? What's the actual problem? And then we turn those into challenges. We may bring that into our normal S&T portfolio and say, all right, I'm going to do an S&T development to actually find a way to utilize and leverage software-defined waveforms to be able to on the fly create a network that will operate in a contested comms environment. So that might be a project that we might develop. So we would develop something like that coming out of our foundry. So why do you care about that? Those people that are on the other end of this webinar that I wish I could see, I hate speaking at things like this when I can't read the audience, but those people that are out there, I think you guys have got the concepts, you've got the ideas that we want to consider. So how do we find these people? Well, some of it is word of mouth, but some of it is every time we do one of these foundries, we post an announcement on LinkedIn. And we bring them in through an open front door. Oftentimes we'll vet them through the Softworks ecosystem and bring people in. And vetting doesn't mean you have to have a clearance or anything like that. It's just, we also want to make sure, just because you say that you're the world expert in AI doesn't mean that, people necessarily agree with you. But we bring in up to 30 people for every one of these events. So if you're interested in that, and it's not a shameless plug, because God only knows a million people follow me already, but follow me on LinkedIn and I will post those and you can put your name in there. The last thing that we do after we do these defining the problems is that we take some of them and we do tech sprints off of there, typically driven by like the software development cycle. The name is escaping me. You all know what it is. I'm not a software person. Anyway, so those are 6 weeks to 3 month sprints where we look to deliver a capability and we assess it. So if you don't have time, or you're not interested in thinking about things, but maybe you've got a project that you think could deliver that capability, we can do a tech sprint off of that. So please go out and hit our the information we have on the web about the areas that we're interested in. If your company or your startup has an idea that you think is interested, we have a very open front door. You can go to esof.mil, ESOF.mil. And you can also get to it if you Google doing business with Socom. We try to hit multiple ways so that you don't have to know the magic word that, oh, you got to type ESOF to find this. No, you can type doing business with Socom and you can find it. And those white papers, which are very simple, it doesn't have to be 14 different formats or anything like that. You can just give us a slick sheet that you've got along with how to get a hold of us and why you think this is of interest to us, and we'll run that through our traps and get you feedback. Our goal is to get you feedback within 30 days. We're doing pretty well about that. Then the last thing I want to say to you all is that I mentioned hackathons, prize challenges as a metric and a way that we do this. We had actually hoped when we were going to do this in person that we would be able to actually do a hackathon at the event. But given that we're not in person, I'm going to give you what the topic that we're sponsoring is. So you all get a heads up on this, a head start. We will put this out within the next couple of months via the Softworks ecosystem, and there's a chance to win a hackathon and contribute to national defense. So this specific hackathon we're going to do is against the question, and it's similar. It's aligned with the changing environment that Robert mentioned. And I apologize for reading it, but develop a user-friendly way to fuse multiple sensors focused on or around the same geographic area. So in other words, what is the situational awareness in a specific place in order to establish patterns of life on a person, a specific individual? So right now we do this, anybody that watches, that's a military geek, we do lots of overhead imagery with unmanned vehicles and, overhead drones, et cetera, et cetera. But in the future world, we're not going to have that. So how can we develop patterns of life? How can we know what normal looks like? So that's the goal here. The stretch goal would be if we could do a group and be able to distinguish, here's 10 members of a cell, and here's what this person does on Sunday, here's what this person does on Wednesday. Hey, I don't know why Bob's doing that. Bob's never done that before. That's a little weird, right? That's the goal here. And we've got a lot more detail here that'll be in there talking about getting the data in and out, where you store the data, how much processing, so there's lots of pieces to this. There's sensing, there's data analytics, there's information transfer, et cetera. So Stan, we'll look forward to you all participating in that, and I look forward to your questions, and I'm ready to pass it to Mike to give to Leslie. Over.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. As you were talking about that, I remember a few years back doing a Trident Spectre exercise, which is this great tech innovation field testing, and literally being given things in 3D printing boxes with just wires, and working with the developers, running it out in town, running it on an op, and then coming back and working with people, and just how great the problem solving is there, and how we do integrate some really unique and unconventional people into the special operations world. So thank you for that. That was great. And now, lastly, over to Miss Leslie Babich to talk about Special Operations Softworks, our innovation hub.
Great, thank you, Mike. Waiting to get these queued up, and thank you, Mr. Jones, for really framing the problem, and Ms. Sanders for kind of highlighting some of the technologies, and then announcing the hackathon. We're really excited to support that in the future. So, all right. Okay, so I wanted to talk about Softworks, and I've advanced too quickly, which is really one of the tools in the toolbox that Socom has to engage with industry. So we were established under a Title 15 Partnership Intermediary Agreement. I will call this a PIA from here on out because it's a lot of words. Back in 2015, to really engage with industry, in particular non-traditionals that were developing technologies that weren't necessarily in the line of sight for the DoD primes that DoD primarily works with. We are a neutral nonprofit, so we do the facilitation of the discovery of the technology, the engagement between Socom and potential solutions offerers, and really the acceleration of the development of technology. Socom decides who they would like to work with, okay? Because we are a partnership intermediary agreement holder, we can do things outside of the traditional FAR-based contracting tools, which really help us accelerate to get that technology into the hands of the warfighter. And because we do that, we can work with a very large spectrum of solutions offers to include non-traditional partners in industry that haven't done DoD business before, federally funded research and development centers, laboratories, academia, and interns, and a lot of the folks that have come here in terms of hackathons, very non-traditional businesses. Because this is an entrepreneur forum, I also do want to highlight that under DefenseWorks, there are multiple innovation hubs. So if you have technology that's not necessarily soft peculiar, please do take a look at the DefenseWorks website and see if you could potentially fit and support some of the other services that are out there requiring innovative solutions as well. Right now, our ecosystem is about 55,000. I would say about 10 of those are government partners, but that means that there's 40,000, companies, individuals that are out there that are able to provide solutions to Socom's challenging problems. Really, our charter is proof of theory, proof of concept, and rapid prototyping. Again, we're not going to, for a company that comes to work with Socom through the Softworks vehicle, we're not going to own any of your IP. We're not going to own any part of your company. So I would say we're a very low threat. And again, we're there to facilitate the engagement between Socom and non-traditional industry partners. We want to get the technology to the rapid prototyping stage so we can get it to the hands of the warfighter so they can go evaluate it in the field and do evaluation on that technology. And then they can make that educated decision as to whether or not they would like to incorporate that kit or technology into an existing program of record, or if there's a new program of record that would be created. So big picture on how the process works. And I bring this up not to go into every box, but to give you an idea of how quickly the process is. We'll get a nomination. It could come from a warfighter and a component or a theater special operations command. It could come from a program manager at S&T or some of the other PEOs in special operations forces, acquisition technology, and logistics. It could come from a directorate. But we'll bring the nomination in. We want to do some stakeholder mapping to see if there's any aligned efforts within the command. We also want to make sure that everybody that could potentially be responsible for that technology is tracking. For example, if an operator brings a technology in, we want to absolutely connect them with the program manager that could have responsibility for that technology at the end of the development, because of course they're responsible for programming the funds and the logistics and sustainment of that technology throughout its lifetime. And vice versa, if a program manager brings something in, an idea, we want to connect them with the end user so that they're developing the end user requirements that the operator actually needs. So once we get the nomination, we also want to make sure we have an acquisition strategy, because when we advertise something on our ecosystem, it's a business opportunity. We're not going to flood you with newsletters and junk mail. When we put something out, there's an opportunity for business with Socom. In terms of dollar amount, that could run the gamut. It could be 20,000, it could be 2 million. There really is no average. So we'll put that opportunity out to our ecosystem. Simultaneously, we also put it out to SAM.gov because our goal really is to find that best technology that exists, whether that be in a non-traditional business or one of the DoD primes. We want to make sure that obviously the operator is getting the best technology that's out there. Our submissions typically are on the net for about 30 days. And then we'll collect everything. We hand it over to our Socom stakeholder, and they do the evaluation and determine which company or companies that they would like to further engage with or do business with. The descriptions of all of our events are on our website, so I'm not going to go into each detail. But we mostly have collaboration events, which is when we bring together academia, laboratories, subject matter experts, government stakeholders, and industry so that they can really crash on the problem. It gives government an opportunity to see what technology readiness level the technology is at, potentially how much money and how much time it would take to develop it into a TRL level 7 if it's not there yet. It also gives industry and everybody else an opportunity to really dive down with the government and ask clarifying questions on the problems they're trying to solve. So once that down select happens and Socom decides who they'd like to work with, we can put somebody on contract within 30 days or less. And these are commercial contracts, business to business, or research and development agreements. So that's really the agility here. The funding is set up through a collaborative project order through AT&L, and then our program managers here on staff at Softworks execute those contracts and manage those contracts throughout their lifetime, to include all the reporting and financials. So really we're an extension of Socom's resources. And so it really helps them to get maybe beyond priorities 1 through 5 and maybe be able to dive in through those priorities 6 through 10 on technologies that they're trying to develop. The other routes that could potentially happen from these events are consignments. And that's really when Socom would like to purchase the equipment that's been developed. It doesn't rise to the level of a program of record in terms of funding or sustainment of the life cycle, but they want to maybe buy residual equipment that was developed during the project, or it's just a smaller amount. It could also result in a CRADA. We don't see those very often, but it does happen, but Socom has their own CRADAs as well that you can engage with. Sometimes it goes directly to an OTA or another transaction authority-based agreement, or using MTA, middle tier authorities, or to a FAR-based contract. What we've traditionally seen is a development with a project here at Softworks, and then sometimes it transitions to an OTA or a FAR-based contract after that development. All in all, this process takes about 90 to 120 days on average. And again, once Socom decides who they'd like to work with, we can get folks on contract within 30 days or less. So the types of engagements and the numbers of engagements that we've had since 2015. So far, we've had 223 events. Again, most of those have been collaboration events, which sometimes transition into assessment events. But again, those descriptions are all on our website. From those events, we've had 266 projects in support of Socom. We'll talk about dollar amounts once we get to the impact page. Another way that we discover technology on behalf of Socom is through, it's a virtual forum called Tech Tuesday. So every Tuesday, we listen to pitches from 4 different companies. It's a 30-minute session for each company. It's a 15-minute pitch followed by a 10-minute Q&A. And it's to a government-only audience, again, for the concerns for IP and the information that the solutions offers are presenting. But it's also beyond a US Socom audience, right? So we can have other services participate and we can have other government agencies participate. So it's a really good opportunity for businesses to pitch their technology and have more than just the Socom audience listen in. And it gives an opportunity, you know, for Socom and potentially other services and agencies to partner on projects as well. I think one important thing from this too is that I would say our sweet spot for Tech Tuesday is that TRL 4 and 5, but we do balance looking at the types of innovation. Sometimes we're looking for incremental innovation, which is something that Socom is already doing. They just want to do it better or more efficiently. Think in terms of swap, size, weight, and performance. We also look at adjacent technologies, and that's technology that's being done in the commercial sector. But if we bring it over to the government stakeholders, they could potentially make some modifications, maybe add the security requirements that are necessary, but instead of recreating the wheel, take those processes and technologies that exist on the commercial side and use them to attack a government problem that they're trying to solve. We're also looking for transformational technology, right? We're not just reacting to what the warfighter needs right now, but we're also trying to reach out and see what technologies exist that could really change the way they do business on the battlefield. My favorite example is the teleporter. If we could find somebody with teleporter technology, it's not necessarily a requirement for Socom right now, but it could be a desirement, and I think we'd probably hop on it. Same thing with a lot of the quantum technologies that we're seeing right now. I did want to highlight several of the current events that we have ongoing, and the science and technology, small business innovation research. These did close out, but I want to highlight it for a specific reason. About 3 years ago, Ms. Sanders submitted a legislative proposal, which allowed some of the SBIR funds to go through the Softworks process. So we do the advertising, we collect the submissions, and we do execute some of the SBIR contracts on behalf of Socom. Some of them are still executed by the contracting officers in AT&L. But every round, we're now at 21.3. The submissions did close out, but there will be rounds in 22. So we wanted to highlight that for you guys. And I'll show you some statistics, but we've really reduced the amount of time that it takes to get from a phase 1 contract to a phase 3 prototype. We can do the phase 1 and phase 2 contracts here at Softworks in support of Socom. Socom will still do all of the phase 3 contracts. And then we've got an upcoming event with the Department of Energy National Labs, where we're trying to highlight some of the technologies that they've developed, bring in Socom stakeholders or government stakeholders that might be interested in that technology, as well as industries that could help them commercialize, license, and then manufacture that technology in support of the government. And then finally, this is one of the S&T ones that Ms. Sanders mentioned before. It's kind of one of those innovation foundries where you're trying to bring in SMEs and kind of future thinkers to really crash on a future problem set. So this one is happening in December, and the request to participate closes out on the 29th of October. So if you're interested, please sign up. In terms of impact, obviously, we want to make sure that we're a good investment for Socom. So we've really focused on a couple of things. Knowledge transfers, while not pieces of technology, it really helps when we do that technology discovery for the Socom stakeholders to make educated decisions and to really know the lay of the land in terms of what technologies are out there, who's developing the technology, and to try and really focus on the selection, the potential selections in industry that they could work with on these problems. Validations are validations of technology. We can bring technologies in. And if it works the way the solutions offer says it works, great. If it doesn't, fine too. But now Socom has an educated, way of making decisions based on what they're seeing out there. We can also validate acquisition strategies. We can help inform key performance parameters, key system attributes as they're developing requirements or refining requirements that they already have. Consignments are those pieces of technology and kit that have been developed through a project here at Softworks. And again, Socom has decided that they want to purchase some of the equipment. Again, these don't rise to the level of a program of record, but it is equipment that is being used in the field. And then transitions are those developments that have transitioned to a program of record for Socom. So we've had 37 of those since 2015. And then these are the statistics from the SIBR program that I mentioned, and this is from the first fiscal year that we supported Socom. So we really doubled the number of offers received. If you think about our ecosystem and the small non-traditionals, that is the focus, that is the target population for the SIBR program. And again, we talked about the phase 1 and phase 2 contract times. We've reduced those to less than a month. And then the phase 1 to prototype delivery, which is phase 1 to phase 3, has been reduced by almost 2 years. So we appreciate the faith that you've had in us in helping you execute the SIBR program, and we hope to continue to do that. I wanted to bring up the advanced manufacturing capabilities that we have here. This is available to all of Socom. We do projects for components and folks all the time, but it's also available to the companies that are on contract with Softworks for Socom projects. So they can use our facilities to help develop those rapid prototypes and get it to the hands of the warfighter as quickly as possible. And then I also wanted to highlight our STEM. Part of our partnership intermediary agreement charter is to do STEM and workforce development for the state of Florida. So we do that from college level all the way down to elementary. I also wanted to highlight it because if you have any smart college students out there, sons, daughters, whatever that might be, to encourage them to apply for this. We do all different types of skill sets, cyber, mechanical engineers, physics, electrical engineering. It could be IT, systems administration. But the very cool thing is a lot of them work on projects directly with the operators. Some of them support the processes here for the projects and the events that we hold in support of the operators. But it really gives them an idea of working with Department of Defense. It helps them learn to think very agilely and be innovative and critical thinkers. And they can take that with them to whatever company or entity that they work with after they graduate. And it's a lot of hands-on participation. It's not hand-holding for us. This is the project that you're going to do. Get after it, and please ask questions along the way. So again, a lot of great experience and hands-on opportunities. And we do a lot of work with the schools in the area. In fact, after this, we're going to go to Roboticon and support some robotics training and competition in the local area. So a lot of fun. And again, they really think to ask critical questions. They learn teamwork. Sometimes they learn that the solution they proposed is not always the best. But it's not about them, it's about helping the operator and coming up with the best solution to support the operator. So I think a lot of good life lessons that they learn through STEM. And then I really just did want to foot stomp a couple of these. 82% of the submissions that we get for the events here come from the Softworks non-traditional ecosystem. So again, that is companies that have never done business with DoD before. So I think that's really important. You never know what you're missing. We're a very low barrier of entry. We're in Ybor City. It's very easy to engage with Socom stakeholders here. It's easy to walk in the door and say, hey, what's Softworks about? And we can kind of walk you through how you can use the Softworks mechanism to do business with Socom. And again, I would say it's very quick in terms of developing the technology and getting it to the warfighter, which is really important because we want to get it to them before it's OBE, right? Speed of technology and the development is so fast that if we don't get it to them to experiment with and use in the field quickly, then it's, it's on to the next thing and on to the next thing. And finally, how to get involved with Softworks. If you join the ecosystem, you will get direct notifications on the events that are happening. We also do targeted market research every single Wednesday with our entire staff to include interns, looking for non-traditional businesses, looking for academia and laboratories that are working on the technologies that Socom is looking for. These are usually in support of an event that's upcoming, or maybe just a tech focus area that one of the components has given us to research for a Tech Tuesday. But again, you're getting 100 different company names, academias, and laboratories every single Wednesday to add to our ecosystem and send out invitations for these events. If you have a technology and you'd like to pitch at Tech Tuesday, it's softworks.org/Tech Tuesday. There's a few questions you'd have to answer. Really what we're looking for is, what is your technology? How would you use it to solve the problems that Socom is, the challenges that Socom has? What TRL level are you at? Who are your competitors and why is your technology differentiated from your competitors? And again, a great opportunity to pitch that tech to a government-only audience. If you're a subject matter expert in something, could be autonomous operations, speaking of the event that we have coming up in support of S&T, please sign up. We'd love to hear, what you have to offer and to really help you collaborate on the problems. And then if you have technologies that you want to submit to events, just click on the particular events tab and request to submit your technology there. So if you have any questions at all, please hit me up on LinkedIn or send me an email at leslie.babich@softworks.org. We balance our time between talking with components and our stakeholders internally on how to use the Softwork mechanism, because there's always turnover. People are, moving from base to base, location to location. So it's really important for us to educate our internal stakeholders, as well as educate the small non-traditional businesses that would like to use the Softworks mechanism. So please give us a call. If you can't travel, we're happy to do a virtual call as well. And that's all I've got.
Excellent. Thank you, Leslie. Really appreciate that. I think everybody has kind of got Zoom fatigue and webinar fatigue at this point. And you can hop on a webinar anywhere in the world any time of day. And I think this is just really great content for people to actually take something out of this and be actionable. And thank you for providing all that. Socom has a great customer-facing arm with everybody here. But we do have a few minutes, so I wanted to bring something up. Robert, you said something that I wrote down in the beginning that said populations are the opportunity. And having to, and moving forward in great power competition, working with partners and allies, it's going to be critical to understand populations, sentiment analysis, and understanding that we're doing the right thing by our partners, allies, and host nations. Lisa, there's a concept that if you have a few minutes, I'd like to discuss the hyper-enabled operator, talking about the edge computing, the human-machine teaming, and just the way that conceptually we're trying to use, better apply and better find applications for data as we try to influence populations and work with partners and allies.
Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. The hyper-enabled operator really is the intersection of all of our focus areas aligned to a tactical situation. So interesting that you highlighted Robert's point about the population being so important. This is really about working when I'm working with a partner in a local area, but I need to achieve a mission of understanding my environment, communicating effectively, potentially having some sort of an effect, which again, probably not what people think of when they think of special operations. It's not necessarily what we call kinetic. It's not a gun. It's not blowing something up. It may be defusing a very hostile situation. If you could think about just here's something fairly recently in the news. Think about the situations that were sitting at the airports in Afghanistan, as you had just huge volumes of people. And if we had a way to truly understand before those bombers, actually detonated their bombs, that they were a threat, because maybe I had a sensor that pulled them up off of what we call a baseball card because they were a known bad actor. I don't know if these guys were or not. This is totally hypothetical, totally notional. But if we could have done that, I might not, the things that you assume you can do today with your smartphone can be tremendously valuable in a military operation, but I can't be tied to big, massive, computers, and sending reams and reams of data back and getting processed. I'm waiting on that. So at the edge, the intersection of edge processing to be able to, and maybe I need to translate a language. Maybe maybe I need to be able to tell this group of people who don't speak English, and the language that they speak is not, everybody thinks, well, I can do this today. I can go to Siri and say, Siri, what does this menu say? Well, that works great when it's Parisian French or Spanish in a populated city. But some of the languages that we care about are what we call low density languages. There's not a lot of information on certain dialects in Indonesia, for instance, or Africa, so being able to contextually process and determine and translate language, correlate information in order to have an effect, which maybe is stopping the bomber from coming in, or helping somebody in need to get to what they need to do. That's the concept between hyper-enabled operator. We partnered directly with our user at 7th Group, which is in the Panhandle of Florida, and they've been working with us on what sensors need to look like now, and then how might we need to see them working in the future. How much processing do I need locally? How much can I wait for, et cetera? That's the hyper-enabled operator concept in about 3 minutes or less. Over.
Amazing. Thank you, Lisa. Robert, I'd like to kick it over to you for any last thoughts to capture any of this back to the strategic concept.
Okay. Yeah. I just would offer that, the better we understand the problem, the better we will shape our solutions, and the better we'll know what type of technologies we need to equip an operator with. If we're trying to shape the future with our understanding of the past, it's going to be a very short vision, and we need to be honest, intellectually honest, emotionally honest with what our shortfalls have been, and how the world's really changing, and what are we trying to accomplish, and there's so much opportunity out there, and it's just, I guess, one last thing, America did very well. Kind of think it was as the lesser of two evils, if you will, operating beneath the British Empire, as kind of a better alternative, operating beneath the Soviet Union as a better alternative. They were perceived as a greater evil. But when the Cold War ended, up until like 2020, when greater evils fell away, we kind of popped to the top. It's not that we got evil; it's just it's all relative, and our activities became much more, offensive to and intrusive to countries and populations that were all trying to get to their own best space. At the same time, technologies were exploding and connecting people in unprecedented ways, and it created a lot of friction. But in the last couple of years, with the COVID and China becoming much more aggressive, kind of their friendly Pooh Bear mask has come off, and people are seeing that, oh my God, these guys aren't this great deal, because they kind of tried to do the same game and fly beneath us and say, hey, no, we're the better alternative. And so there's an advantage here that's come back to us, is that once again, I think people are going to recognize, America is a better alternative. But we just, again, it's all about contextualizing everything. And this is something that's just happened that I don't think a lot of people are kind of switched on to. U.S. influence rises on the tide of Chinese power. So yes, they're becoming more problematic, but they're going to create their own problems as well. It's something for us to keep in mind.
Excellent. Thank you, Robert. Thank you to everybody on the panel. This was phenomenal. Like I said, I think, with the webinar, the Zoom fatigue that everybody has, I think there's a lot of really actionable items that people can take out of here. And hopefully this spurred a lot of thought with our audience that we aren't able to see here, but hopefully next year for the 22 event, you all will join us again and we'll be in person and we can do some of these pitch days in person. I think that would be phenomenal. I want to thank everybody for participating in DEF this year. Coming out of COVID, it's been a year. It's been a year and a half, 2 years now, and I just want to tell everybody from the bottom of my heart, I did this for a while. I was in Special Operations Command and the United States military for over 20 years, and the things that I experienced there, and the things that we were provided from the command, where all of our great speakers work, it's truly life-saving. It's truly gives the tactical advantage to the guy on the ground. So whether it's an actual life-saving technology or you're just getting that competitive advantage over the adversary, the things that we bring to the table really do truly save lives. One of the soft truths that we usually discuss is humans are more important than hardware, but the hardware and software really gives us an edge over everybody out there, and everybody on this panel is critical in providing that to the folks that are on the ground. Now that I'm out of the command and moving on to the next phase, I want to continue supporting. I hope you all will consider supporting Special Operations Command. It's an amazing place to do business. It's an amazing place to work and get your technology out there if you really care about being an entrepreneur in the defense space. So again, thank you to our panelists. Thank you to everybody who came out to DEF 2021, and we'll see you next year.